G'day guys, welcome back to Pokey Mechanical. I'm Clinton, and today, well, over the next couple of days, this will be a probably a two-part series maybe, is installing this full turbo kit and exhaust onto the Landcruiser behind us. So this is a customer supplied system. It's a G turbo supplied from WA, and I will say one thing, these guys know how to wrap an exhaust system. By hell, that was hard to get apart. But anyway, moving on. All the parts should be here. I've gone through and checked basically everything. I don't think there's anything that's been missed with what should be supplied with this sort of kit. And yeah, it comes with a nice big intercooler and all the intercooler piping parts with joiners and stuff like that. Turbo, obviously, it's got a inlet part for the manifold to come from the turbo to help that go forward. And also a manifold section I've not seen before, doesn't mean it's abnormal. That turbo manifold basically goes onto the factory turbo that's a two-part turbo, so we'll slide the original turbo onto that, and it's got seals and bits and pieces to allow that to bolt on. And then we've got all the other bits and pieces, accessories, gaskets, hose clamps, the whole works is there, so brackets and bits and pieces. We'll give you basically an idea of how hard this is to do yourself, and also how difficult it'll be to like do by yourself, or if it's something we would recommend a mechanic workshop to do. And it depends on your mechanical capabilities of whether you'll be able to do this yourself or not. Righto, let's get stuck in. We need to get some rust off first of all onto the bolts to get the manifold loose, and then we'll start putting it all in. Okay, so one thing I want to show you is this G turbo manifold, how it's got this joiner on the end. What we need to do is we'll have to take off the whole turbo just to inspect the sealing surfaces and stuff like that. As soon as he stops making a hell of a noise, I can work. See how the manifold at the back here, it splits in two. That's where this manifold will become part of the other one, the original one. So we'll take that off and clean it right up, and then replace the seals and bits and pieces that go in that joiner. And that's how it goes on for this new manifold. Alrighty, what I'm doing here is I've just got a pair of nuts out of the old bulk bucket. Just going to do that up onto that nut so it's tight. Then that's going to lock that on. And this is basically all the nuts have come off on the studs out of the head. So we've got all these that need to basically have all that taken off. Even with putting our Worth Rostoff on, we still need to extract the nuts off the studs, and they're a little bit tight. So I've just got the 14mm spanner in the vise to hold the front nut there, lock the two nuts together, and that bites on this stud and makes it so the stud won't turn in the nut. And then just need to wind that off. Might just go and get a bit of Rostoff for that just to loosen it a bit tight. This stuff here is probably one of the best products we've ever used. Works really well for loosening these sort of things. And corroded studs, threads, nuts, all that sort of stuff. I'm just going through and lubricating all of these up. And it straight away loosened that up. Phenomenal product. It's not even feeling like it's tight. That's actually surprising. I thought that must have been really loose in the head for that to be that loose. Be interesting to see actually if this exhaust manifold has got a blown gasket with all these coming out like they did, because they should have been that loose in the head, so it's giving a bit of a concern of why they were. If there's a blown gasket, that'll indicate that the reason for it, but they could have just been rusty on the ends, and that's what pulled them out. Right, so the manifold's off, and the gasket, Stephen's saying, doesn't look like it's blown.
No, there's no.
So that's good. It must just be
carbon or anything around it.
Must have just been the rust on the end of the studs that's caused it to grab on those nuts and come off. Righto, time to clean up the manifold, and I might get you to put it up in the air now, mate.
Yep.
And we'll rip the exhaust out from under it so that's not in the way for doing the whole job.
So the whole exhaust is going to come off since we have a different system to put on it. So I'm going to start undoing the brackets up here and then all the way down and take the whole exhaust off. And I've snapped the bolt. That's what you're not supposed to do. Cool. And we're out ish. There we go. Out.
Oh, that's heavy.
Oh, all right. Now that's out of the way. Hopefully this comes back. All right, so it turns out to get this part of the exhaust off, I've got to drop the gearbox cross member a little bit. So we've got the jack up underneath it. I'm just going to loosen the bolts off and then drop it down a little bit, get the exhaust out and bolt it straight back up. Drop down a little bit.
Right, we've got 2-part manifold here for the Landcruiser. 2-piece manifold. So I've got to get this section off because that's getting reused with the new manifold. And it's proving to be a little bit tight, so we'll get a bit of the old rust off in here that basically penetrates all rusty sort of components, and just let that soak in. Right, so I've got the rust off on there and I've given it a minute to try and free it up, soak in and penetrate into it, and oh, look at that, straight away that's loosened it up to the... And we got it out. See, that was actually a bit easier than I was expecting it to be with how rusted that looked. Right, now it's just to check these seals out and see how it goes in the new manifold. So I'll go and grab that. Okay, so these are the little O-ring exhaust seals. There's one there and one just there, and just got to get them off. I've never replaced these before, so this will be a first for me to actually see how these pull out. And don't know how easy they're going to be to move. I reckon we're going to have to soak them a bit. Right, we'll let them soak, and then hopefully that'll bite into that rust that's in there and be able to pull that ring out. So looking at this ring and analysing it, the actual height, you can see the inside there is pretty much like it doesn't recess inside anything on the inside, so I think I'll be able to just crush this to be able to pull it out. And it's at this moment you go, fuck, I hope this is the right bit, because I can't fucking fix that. Right, so that one's out, and that'll get replaced by that ring there. Now let's have a look at these little suckers. Genuine Toyota parts these are. I reckon they're probably the only place you can get them, but this came with the turbo kit. And when these go on and they clip in, it's actually got a overlapping lock ring, and it goes, that join on here is almost invisible, but I did spy it. I will need to use the light to see. Of course it's on the other side. So I'm just going to use a small punch and just try and catch one edge of this ring. I don't know if it's going to happen. Okay, so I had to get a little bit brutal here with a chisel and just sort of jam it in there and break this ring. And now I'm just sort of punching this piece around that's going in underneath it all to hopefully get all this out, because that is rusted in there tight. I'll clean up there where the chisel slightly damaged that surface. I'll just clean that up with the file, but it shouldn't be an issue for it to reseal. That's got that one. So I'll clean up in that groove there in a minute, and I've got to get this second ring off here. So I've got to find where the join is. It's around this side on this one, so I'll turn this around. Okay, so I don't know if you're going to see on the GoPro, but right there where my finger is, there's a join. Hopefully I can separate that with the chisel and get some joy out of getting this off. There we go, that's got into it. Now hopefully I can just use this punch. Yep, just drive that in around. I'll just work this way around and clean that right up, ready for this to go back together. Okay, so what I've done here is I've gone and filed with this tiny little file and cleaned out all the corrosion and rust in this ring, and hopefully that'll clean that right up to the point that it'll make that new circlip go straight in. Let's hope I can get this together without breaking this ring, because it feels like it's very, very brittle. There we go. Now, can I get it to go down another level without buggering it up? There we go. Whew. I will admit, that was a little bit stressful. Now, I would assume this would be very much like cylinder rings. So once you get it on and you are trying to line it up, put your joins so they're opposite each other, and then it reduces less risk of gases getting past. If both your joins are at the same line, it's less work for the gas to go straight down through. Where if it's around like that, it's got to go down through there, and around past, and then down through there again. So by doing that, we'll reduce that risk. Okay, now it's time to just install this ring, and I would expect that it should just tap down nicely, keeping it nice and flat, going down evenly. Now for ease of installation, this looks like that chamfered edge will allow this to feed straight onto that, but I'm going to actually put some anti-seize copper grease on here just to try and make it seat better and smoother. Probably don't need that much. I'm going to put this on fairly liberal. I don't really mind if it's got a lot there, it'll burn away eventually. It might stink a little bit out the exhaust, but it's not going to hurt any of the components or anything being in there. But by having it all lubricated, should make the installation of these two parts to go together a lot smoother. Righto, so this should, with that chamfer on the inside edge of this, close these rings up as it goes down, and hopefully, no, become, oh look at that, perfect, straight in, like a finger in a bum. See, they're all on. Okay, now the head's all cleaned up and new studs are in. Can put these brand new Toyota genuine gaskets on. And we're ready for the manifold to be mounted on. Okay, now I've got the gasket on the head and all the studs in. It's time to put the studs in the manifold to mount the turbo to it. And then we can start fitting it into the car. So I'll put a bit of Loctite on these threads. We don't want them coming loose, so we'll just torque them in. Cool. That goes that way onto the manifold, and we just need to put the exhaust gasket in place. And they've given us these nice nuts to go along with the studs. I'm not sure what the material of the studs are made of. I'm really hoping they're Inconel studs, but it's hard to tell just by looking at them. Saying that I didn't supply these, I'm not 100% sure. Torque them down. Once they're all done, that'll be ready to go in the car. Last thing I want is for this customer to be coming back because this gasket blew out because the nuts weren't tight enough. Okay, so another section that needs to be added into this is the oil supply and return. So it comes with the gasket and it comes with this fitting. One thing to note is that piece there is actually separate from this flat plate, but it's been bronzed on by the look of it. It's actually been, you can see the weld sort of around that edge just there. I just like to inspect these because I have had one crack before and I didn't inspect it before putting it in, so I had to warranty the job, and yeah, I have no sort of idea whether it was my fault or the fault of the part that the customer supplied. So I always check those sort of things to make sure they're right to go. Cool, that's nice and tight. The bolts for the rear, the studs for the rear, I'm going to Loctite them in as well, then they can be fitted up. Right, now I reckon it's ready to go in. Okay, so the oil supply for the turbo is done from the oil pressure sensor, the sender unit that bolts to the block. So normally that piece right there would screw straight into the block, but we put this T-piece in. We'll screw that in and orientate the end of that to be facing towards the end of the back of the engine. And then that could go straight in and we'll be able to have the oil supply going around for the back of the motor. So where this is located is right in the back here, behind the starter motor. I'll screw that in there and you'll be able to see where it goes. Make sure if you're doing this job that you disconnect the starter and turn the power cable around, or this isn't going to actually go in. I don't know if you can see that there. So that's fitting right in there. Then we can put the plug back on the sensor at the back of it. There we go. Cool. Come on. There we go. Oh, that's a tight fit. It's in there though. So this may have to come off again. I'll just lightly fit these bolts up, the nuts up. I won't put all of them on. I may need to adjust something on the turbo or remove it for being able to get the oil line on or anything like that. Oil return, etc. Sweet. So I'll loosen out. That fits in there nice and tight. Okay, the instruction manual for this turbo kit requests me to actually punch a hole in the side of the sump and then put a spear through that hole that's the correct size that this will screw into, and wanting me to tap a thread and then screw this fitting in here and use JB weld. And that's something that seems to be a bit of a common thing for these turbo upgrade kits, but I don't like that idea, and I said to the customer that it's going to cost you a little bit more because I prefer to actually drill the hole correctly and then weld it into the sump. So I'm going to remove the sump and weld this on one side and then on the inside, so the outside and then the inside of the sump as well. Only because I just don't trust the idea of ramming it through a piece of sheet tin and then just hoping it's going to seal forever. I'd rather make sure it's done like absolutely spot on to the point that it's not going to leak. So just in the middle of removing the sump now, let me just show you a couple of things that you need to do with this model vehicle. At the side of the sump, this is the sump obviously here, at the side of it you've got these braces that come down from the block to the bell housing of the gearbox. So we've got to remove that, and there's one on that side as well. That gives you room for these bolts here to be able to undo and then drop the sump straight down. I forgot to film this part. I took the sump off yesterday, and that is getting ready to have the oil drain put into it. This part with that piece there. One thing to note with these Landcruisers is they do have an oil level sensor that basically is in the sump. And if you do not remove this, there's a chance you can break that when you pull the sump off. So make sure that comes off before you remove the sump on any Landcruisers. Okay, we've got the sump that we've just basically eyeballed and gone off the instructions that it requires the drain to go in this panel here. How they've worked it out is counting back from here, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So between 3 and 4 on the side is right there. So we'll put the hole in there and then have our bung going in to our return, going into that section, but that means this drain is going to have to be on an angle facing forward to get to where the actual drain is for the turbo. But that's okay, that can actually rotate any direction once it's on there with that fitting. Alright, now that's all cleaned up, both inside and outside, it is ready to start TIG welding. Okay, before I weld, after I've ground all the area where it's going to be welded, give it a clean with brake clean. I've done that on the inside of the sump as well. Now we'll just chuck our fitting in, and that's basically the perfect size for this thread that it will just wind in by hand. But to get it to seat right down, I'll need to use a spanner. I want that to feel fairly firm. That way we know it's all the way home. And now we can start welding it. Oh, new injectors for the Landcruiser I've got here, so we're going to go through the stages of what's needed to be done to put new injectors in. And these ones are an exchange full reconditioned setup. So we've got to send his old ones back, and these ones are full reconditioned, ready to go in. So what you get there is your washers for the seat that goes down inside the engine, and also washers for the return for the diesel return line. All right, let's get to the car and get them in. Okay, before we start, I'm going to blow out all along through here where the injectors are going to be lifted out, because there's a whole heap of dirt that you don't want to getting down on the seats where the injectors seat into the head. Make sure that your intake's completely taped up. Alrighty, first stage of getting this apart is get the injector lines loose on the top of the injectors. Just a sharp, quick hit will crack these ones off on this style engine. Be careful that some cars are not the same as this. So this only goes for this type of injector that's like this. Some cars you have to hold a lower nut to not damage the injector and all sorts of different things. This one, not so much. I really like this style. Really easy to work on and do. So your injection lines come down through underneath the manifold here. Need to remove this little bracket just so you can get enough flex for the injector lines to get out of the way to get the injectors off. I need 2 hands to do this though. Be careful not to drop those nuts because they're very, very small and no one wants to lose their nuts. So a little trick for these is screwdriver down from the top here, down to the actual bracket, and just try and get it in there somewhere to try and pry it away, because the rubber sort of glues itself to these and doesn't want to come apart. There we go. Then you can get it off, and those injector lines now will move enough to be able to get the injectors out. Alright, so I need to get these nuts off here first, then we can take this return line out of the way. Then we can start getting the injectors undone out of it. So just down here at the back of the injection pump, you can see all the lines. We need to take them off so we've got more movement with these lines here, because they're a bit old and I don't want to risk breaking them. This just basically frees them up and makes them a little bit looser from their original mounting point. So then we don't damage the lines and getting them off, because you don't want to have damaged lines. So on the top of your injector here, we've got the return the nut for the return line for the diesel. Some of these can be corroded. If they feel like they're corroded and tight, use a bit of Rostov from Worth or WD-40 if you've got it. Rostov's probably the best product I've ever used. And then, yeah, soak them in that before undoing them. These are coming off pretty easy. Okay, so when you're pulling this out, the only thing you need to watch is this line here goes down to the diesel pump, and it's in between cylinders 2 and 3. And yeah, it's just in line with where that injector is right there. So just follow that down, reach under here, undo the little tab and pull it up, and she'll come out. No, I'm gonna need the breaker bar.
Oh, that's tight.
I'll just crack all of these while I've got the breaker bar going. That way.
See how the fuel lines are all loose and they all move out of your way now?
Makes it a lot easier to work once you've got them loose and
because they're not connected down here, they all move out of the way wherever you need them, rather than taking the manifold off and getting them out.
Injectors are loose and you've wound them out with some might need the ratchet to pull out, but you should just be able to pull that out. What you'll have in there still is the actual washer or the seal for the injector down inside the head. Right down in that hole is the actual washer. We need to get that out as well. We'll get that out in a minute. One thing just that I always double check is when I pull the first injector out, just line it up to make sure it looks like the exact same type of injector. I've only had one in the past that wasn't correct, but these look like they're the same height to the threads, same length, the length of that the same, all looks exactly the same. So that's good to go with the taking the rest out, and then these will be ready to go in a minute. To get the little washers out from where the injectors are, I'll just use a little seal pick and just hook them up and pull them out. It's just a tricky game catching the thread and not dropping the ring. Okay, there is a secondary washer or seal for these injectors that's down inside the hole. That little tiny one there need a different O-ring, different seal pick to dig it out, and make sure you get all these out. There should be 6 of them as well. So 1 in each cylinder, and then they're the first ones we've got to put in, and then the other ones have got to be put in as well. These come with all the seals attached to one of the injectors. I've just unwound it off that and then get it apart. I'm going to actually use a clean drawer in here, so I can just lay them out and keep them all tidy, and it's not going to mix them up with all the old stuff that I've got on the bench. Just makes it easier to work, to make sure you get them all, and you can also lay them out and count them to make sure they're all there.
What are the silver ones?
The bigger ones?
Yeah.
You mean? They're for the return line.
Oh, the return,
washers.
Yep.
That go on top of the injector.
There's all your
Sweet.
pressures.
Cool, they're ready to go in. Let's get them in the car. Okay, so just going to put the injector in. I've put a tiny little bit of engine assembly lube on the thread. And yeah, just put them in and we will torque them all down to the specification of requirement for Toyota. To make sure that the crush washer gets crushed exactly how it needs, these need to be done up with a torque wrench to the specification set by the manufacturer. And that's it there. Cool, they're done. Now I'm just giving all the ends of these pipes a clean before we assemble the pipe work back onto the injectors. And that way, I know that there's not going to be any little bits of dust creating a interference with the seal. Before I put them on, I've got to put the return line on. Okay. Just giving this a wipe just to make sure there's no grit or anything on that. These return lines don't have to be super tight, just nipped up. Firm. Okay, once you've got your injecting lines in, make sure you go through and tighten all these fittings up onto the pump, and then you've got to go through and fit in all the brackets for the lines, put all them back in. Now that all the injectors are in and injector lines all back on, I haven't done them up tight on the back of the injectors because we're going to have to bleed them when we try and start the engine. Now it's time to start fitting up the sump and get an answer about what's going on with this exhaust system. Okay, this is the filter off the Landcruiser. I'm just cutting it open to inspect the element inside. So let's just have a look. The customer was questioning what's the internal of their engine like. And I said, let's just pull the filter apart and we'll have a look in there first. So Stephen was just questioning, is cutting it open with a grinder going to interfere with what you're going to see? But actually down in between these bits of filament, it's not going to get in there. When you grind, you may see a little bit of it, but it's when you cut it open, you're going to see what I mean. Well, all right, I'm going to get a knife and cut these open and see what we find. Okay, so what I've done here is just chopped into the filter like that. So just cut into there and then pull this paper out. Had to cut a straight line across that way as well to get it out, and then you can pull this right out. And using the light, we can look really close to see if basically what we're looking for is any sparkly bits of metal. And it's wise to check both sides because sometimes these go reverse through, but usually it's the outside going in. And there's nothing in that one. And there's also nothing in that one at all. So you can see there, hopefully you can see on that easily, there's nothing on that. And there's nothing sparkly showing up in that element as well either. So that's good. That means the inside of the motor should be healthy and a little bit dirty, but otherwise should be good to go. Okay, what I'm fitting now is the Pyro gauge fitting into the exhaust. This customer supplied the exhaust, and the exhaust comes with an actual bung fitting already welded onto the side of the dump pipe. So I just need to screw that into it and fit it in. So as you can see, it's just here behind the turbo. And it's a different thread size. Awesome. So now I need to find a fitting in that fits this bung. Sake. So I've had to go and get another fitting to adapt this to it, and I was a bit curious of whether that's going to be too much distance for the exhaust sensor to go into it. I'll just put that through and see. Customer's already installed the Pyro gauge and just got the fittings coming through here, which is really handy for me. So let's just have a look to see. Yep, so by the time that screws in to that fitting, that's going to come right through to there. That'll be plenty inside the exhaust to be able to actually measure the temperature and get a good reading, so that'll be fine to go on like that. Cool, we'll just leave that there so I don't lose the nut off it. And we can fit this into the exhaust now. It's a little bit dark in here, but I should be able to see what I'm doing. Luckily that fitting was already welded into the exhaust system, so made for a little bit easier work to get that in. Just fitting the Pyro gauge now into that fitting and pushing it all the way in up to the spring, and then the olive inside will clamp down when we tighten that up. Don't over tighten these, just need to make it tight enough that this doesn't pull back out, and that's perfect like that. Should squeeze down in here. Hit it hard. Yep. And sick.